Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. So let's start the discussion. So let's have a little bit introduction about what the book is about and who the author is. So Kincaid is a Caribbean American writer whose works often deal with the themes of identity, colonialism, and cultural erasure. A Small Place is a non-fiction work by Kincaid published in 1988 that offers a scathing critique of colonialism and tourism in Antigua. So the author, she often writes about identity, critique of colonialism and tourism in Antigua. So this book offers a criticism of the colonialism and the tourist culture in the Caribbean island of Antigua, how it is tourism is affecting the locals. And the book also challenges the narrative of Antigua as a tropical paradise and exposes the harsh realities faced by its residents. So, I mean, from the outside, Antigua is might look as a perfect place, a paradise, tropical paradise where tourists can come and enjoy. So she's pointing out the drawbacks of tourism in Antigua. So, first, let's have a brief historical context of Antigua. Antigua was colonized by British in 1632 and remained a British colony until it gained independence in 1981. So, like many other countries, Britain also colonized Antigua, and it remained a British colony even after India and most of the countries were free from the colonial rule. So Antigua was primarily used for agricultural purposes, same as everywhere. They uses the colonizers used the natural resources in the farmer colonies and exploited the natural conditions, like forcing farmers to grow certain kind of crops that could be beneficial for their business back in home. Like they forced Indian farmers to grow cotton when they were dying of hunger because they wanted to use that cotton for their industries in England. So after independence, Antigua struggled to establish itself as a sovereign nation and faced economic and political challenges, including corruption and income inequality. Same as all the former colonial nations, Antigua also faced a lot of struggles. Like first, you don't have funds to start a new country. Then you have a lot of infrastructure to build. You have people to feed. You have to look at from all the aspects. You have to also back and save the sovereignty of the nation. So it is a lot of struggle. It is a lot of struggle to start the nation after the colonizers have left. So let's have a brief summary. So the book is divided into four sections. So, in the first section, Kincaid provides a brief history of Antigua and describes the island's landscape and people. Like, what are the cultural, identities of the people? How is the geographical location? How's the weather like? Then she contrasts the image of Antigua as a tropical paradise with the reality of poverty and corruption that exists on the island. So first, she gives a how outsiders view Antigua, like in terms of landscape, weather, and all other conditions. Then she contrasts it with by giving the harsh realities of the natives of Antigua. What are the problems they are facing, like poverty, corruption, like most of the former colonial nations they still face a lot of corruption. That is a constant problem in these countries, and Antigua, I guess, felt more of these problems because it remained colonized for another 20 or 30 years. So after most of the countries were free from the colonial rule. So in the second section, Kincaid explores the legacy of colonialism in Antigua. She describes the violence and oppression that the island's inhabitants suffered under British rule. So, like, you know what they did. They oppressed the people. They forced the agricultural practices. They forced people into doing indentured laboring. I mean, they practically consumed the life out of the people, the inhabitants of the island. In the third section, Kincaid focuses on the relationship between Antiguans and tourists. Like, how is the relation, like the people who come in Antigua, how they behave and interact with the locals. She argues that tourists are responsible for perpetuating a system of inequality that exploits the island's resources and people. So you know what happens when rich people come in a poor country, or relatively poor country. So they are using the resources which the locals can't use because of the poverty. For example, I'm just giving an example. For example, in a tropical land, people might be using the tourists might be consuming, say, coconuts and all the luxuries of tropical island, and the peoples, the islanders, they might not be able to enjoy these resources because they have to earn money to run their household and to run other responsibilities. She also critiques the way that Antiguans are forced to adopt a subservient role in order to cater to the desires of tourists. So, I mean, that any country that faces a constant influx of tourists, they face huge problem in terms of, like, you have to be a constant host who's catering to the needs of the tourists. Like whatever they need, you have to provide them because they are bringing in business to the island. So, I mean, the subservient role that existed the before Antigua gained independence, the same time, the same kind of role they have to adopt again. First, they came as colonizers. Now they are coming as tourists. So, I mean, the situation has changed, but in terms of it hasn't changed in terms of how the inhabitants have to behave. So they still have to follow this role of us pleasing people. So in the final section, Kincaid turns her attention to the role of the readers. She asks the reader to consider their own complicity in the exploitation of Antigua and the other former colonies. She argues that the act of reading itself is an exercise in power and that readers have a responsibility to question the narratives they encounter. So you know how the whole enterprise of colonialism started. I mean, before they could they could physically, control the farmer colonies. They started certain narratives about these nations. For example, they started this narrative of how the people in third world countries are uneducated, mannerless, and they are not sophisticated. They need to learn they need to learn new manners. They need to have a modern education system. They need to learn about uh, the emerging topics in terms of education. They need to learn and how to use new technologies. So they floated all these kinds of narratives about the former colonies. Like they created a contrast. Whatever the colonizers, like say British and American people were, the people in the former colonies like Antigua, they were the quite opposite of what the colonizers were. That's how they portrayed these colonies to the rest of the world. They said that we are doing a service to these colonies by ruling over them. So, I mean, the classic example is the white man's burden. So then she's bringing attention to the role of the reader, how readers can be influenced and how they have to see into how what is the power of the narratives. So what readers can do in terms of not getting manipulated by the narratives they come across. Maybe it is through the people who have been to these places, like tourists and delegates for and other kinds of narratives they come across. Basically, she's saying that you have to be very critical in terms of whatever narratives you are getting. You have to apply your critical faculty before you believe in these kinds of narratives. So let's focus on themes. So in the brief summary and discussion, you must have realized what are the possible themes in the book. So first is identity and cultural erasure. So how this book is about how they don't have a identity of their own, the Antiguan people. Their identity is how they are to be perceived. It depends on the narratives that are floated about Antiguan people by these tourists and earlier by the colonizers. So, and she also talks about the cultural erasure, how the indigenous culture of the island was erased by the first by the colonizers and then by these tourists. So then she talks about tourism and its effects on the local population. So I mean, coming to the earlier point of cultural erasure, so you know that any country that faces that relies on to a tourist business, so the culture of that country changes over time. So the indigenous culture starts being replaced by the people of the culture, the culture of the people who come to these countries. And then she's talking about how tourism is influencing the local population in terms of, say, the new kinds of drugs that are coming to these places, the new kinds of habits that are coming to the island. For example, she says that people in her generation were used to be very educated, and now they feed on this pop culture, pop songs, and they are not that educated. They are not that intellectually, you know, uh, good to question these kinds of narratives. And she also talks about exploitation and corruption, how the newly elected governments in these former colonies, how they kind of serve the self-fulfilling roles in the higher positions. They are they are gaining access to a lot of wealth, and they are accumulating it for their generation and the coming generations, rather than doing service to the people of the nation. They are using those resources for their goodness, for their uh, well-being. So, and then she also talks about effects of colonial education, like the biggest impact of colonial education is it makes you forget your own historical perspective. So basically, you are fed this history that is not original, that is not authentic. You are spoon fed with the kind of secondary history. You forget about your own culture, your own cultural identity. So that's what they did in India as well. Like they they force people to follow certain kinds of with education comes the change of mindset, how you are made to appreciate foreign culture rather than your original culture, because it is portrayed in such a way in this colonial educational system, in colonial knowledge that is created. There was whole business of colonial knowledge that was created, and how it caused damage to the former colonies. So now let's conclude this discussion. The book is a powerful critique and a rather scathing critique of colonialism and how it impacts the farmer colonies. It also discusses the role of tourists in perpetuating the stereotypes and damaging the culture, and bringing bad habits, bad influences on the island. Then I mean, one thing I failed to mention was the use of second person narrative, which is a powerful narrative tool. Generally, you don't see a work written in second person point of basically using you straight away addressing the reader. That has a very powerful connection, if a powerful influence if it utilized in a skillful way. Mostly we see like first person pronouns, like first person point of view or the third person point of view. But in this book, the author uses a second person narrative point of view, and that has a very powerful effect in terms of connecting directly with the readers and making the readers aware of the intricacies and the power dynamics in terms of the this island Antigua. And it also talks about read how readers can make a difference in terms of believing and rejecting the certain narratives about certain places. Basically, she is saying that use your own critical faculty before you start going, believing in false things and false history and other things. So I hope you liked the discussion, and kindly comment and share for more such videos. Thank you.